South East Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Well, Bertie Ahern was one of the most notorious and influential political leaders of the last century, but following his resignation from Fianna Fáil in 2012, he has very much been out of the limelight. I'm delighted that Bertie has joined me on the show this morning to discuss what he has been doing since his high-profile resignation and to offer his thoughts on the current economic landscape in Ireland. Bertie, I suppose we need to start the interview by going back to 2012 and finding out what you've been doing in the intervening period.
Mainly involved in conflict resolution issues. I have been involved in conflicts from the Kurds in Turkey, the Basques. I was involved in the ETA ceasefire back a few years ago. I've spent a lot of time in Ukraine. I've been involved in the Ukraine, in Donbass and Kiev, with the CMI's Conflict Management Initiative. I've did a bit in the Congo and a few other conflicts as well. So I spend a lot of time in that, and then I'm involved with a few boards, mainly with people that I've known over the years, a few commercial boards, and I've done a lot with the Epilepsy Foundation, the charity that I and the family have been involved in. So I've kind of divided my time three ways, but conflict resolution has tended to take up more and more of my time.
And over the last 5 years, the Fianna Fáil party has undergone a significant period of change. It has been deconstructed and rebuilt to a point where it is now at the top of the opinion polls again. Do you feel that the party is now in a position that will enable Micheál Martin to assume the role of Taoiseach following the next election?
Well, I assume the next election will probably be next year. I think it's unlikely to go any longer, in my view, and I think that would probably bring it to the end of the agreement that was made back early last year. The party at 44 seats, I think it has to get to 60, to get into a credible position of being able to feature and really control the next government, or at least be in the strong position of having control. And I think that's doable. I mean, I think 60 seats is very doable. And if that's the case, then I think they have a real opportunity. I think the days of single party government are over, but I think it's back to where we've been for a long time, when we were in power in coalition governments. So I think that's really where the party is at, and hopefully they can achieve that.
Now, June 23rd, 2016 was a historic day for both the UK and the rest of the European Union when Brexit became a reality. 9 months on, we have very little knowledge about what lies ahead. But from an economic perspective, what causes you the greatest concern for Ireland?
Well, there are so many issues, I think, arising out of Brexit. On the economic front, it is true to say, over my political lifetime, we've moved from a position where we exported 50, close to 60% of all our products and all our exports to the UK, to it now being 17. I mean, that's been a formidable achievement by the country. But within that figure, I think hides a few realisms that we now have to contend with. And the biggest one of those is that a lot of our indigenous Irish companies are very good, small and not so small indigenous Irish companies export to the UK. And they don't really have the ability to be able to go into new or further field markets for lots of reasons. And if you look at the food sector, which is 45% of our food products and the perishables go to the UK market, we always have the currency difficulties that can create them a lot of ups and downs. But now Brexit, where they could have tariffs loaded onto them, that's really, I think, the area. And that's an area, like, we are an agricultural country. It's maybe not as big as it was in days past, but it's still as important. And I think our farming community and our farming families and regions of the country are hard-working, good people. And I think that's the area where I would primarily put our support to helping these companies. And of course, there's other indigenous companies that are not in the rural heartland. They're also in the same positions. But I think that's the real challenge and the real campaign that we have to fight our way as these discussions, which are just starting, that we have to try and make sure we get a fair deal for Ireland.
And what do you think should be done to prepare for what could be one of Ireland's greatest challenges?
Yeah, I think this is probably our biggest challenge since we joined the European Union and since we broke away from the currencies back in 1979 and the Jack Lynch government, is really important for us. We have to negotiate on two fronts. We have to try and make sure that we have an understanding with the British government of what the parameters of this agreement will play out and what the shape of it will be on the other side of the 2-year period. And then we have to play our part within the European Union as being one of the 27 that will negotiate the shape of the agreement, and of course we're on the side of the EU 27 on that, and we have to try in both those discussions make sure that the issues that affect our economy, our country, north and south, the island economy, which we've worked so hard on to develop over the last 20 years or so, that we're catered for in that. I do think, Karl, there's a lot of respect in the European Parliament, in the European Commission and in the Member States of the European Union that we are probably, and I think they would say, the most affected country out of Brexit. That being the case, we have to try and make sure that there are the commitments and the issues that are important to us, that we can get those into the agreement. It won't be easy because, we all understand Europe is great and everyone fights together, but we've watched it time and time again where people get parochial, we all do, and they'll go back to fighting their own case, and it won't be easy for us to keep ours up and light, but that is the challenge, and that's what we have to do.
You were, of course, heavily involved in the peace process, and unfortunately one of the people you worked closely with during the negotiations was Martin McGuinness, who passed away recently. Do you fear that Brexit will have a detrimental effect on relations between the north and south of the border?
I think it's key for us to try, and the Taoiseach has said this, to negotiate as best we can to assist Northern Ireland in every way. Hopefully we get to a stage where the executive and the assembly and everything is up and running. But there are huge problems for Northern Ireland. 10% of their GDP comes directly from payments from Brussels. 80% of the income of farmers comes from Brussels. A huge amount of the cross-border projects that have been dealing with quality and parity of steam, a lot of the Interreg programmes, the Erasmus programmes, all of these educational programmes, cross-border peace programmes are funded from Brussels. The British government have kind of said that they'll continue to be funded, but the commitments have been far from strong or sound in my view. So I think we have huge challenges, and of course the old question again: is there going to be a border? Is it going to be a hard border, which equals a border where we're back to customs posts or security posts? None of us wants that. I don't think anybody on the island of Ireland wants that. But it'll happen. Unless we negotiate our way through it. Pascal Lamy, who is the expert on world trade, the former leader of the WTO organisation, former commissioner for trade, he has said that if the border between north and south is also the land border of the EU and the UK, in the new arrangement, then there has to be customs posts, and then there has to be what we would consider a hard border. So this would be, in my view, a disaster, and it is for us to find an alternative to that happening. I recently heard the former governor of the Bank of England saying, and it is something that I had said at a conference in Derry last year, that we should be trying to find a way that the border, from a customs point of view and security point of view, becomes the border of Northern Ireland to the UK, not the border between North and South. And I think that won't be easily achieved, but I do believe we should be fighting for that.
Taoiseach Enda Kenny made global headlines during his recent trip to the States when, right in front of President Trump, he tackled the issue of immigration and its value to America. What did you make of Enda Kenny's speech? And if you had been the Taoiseach at the time of the Trump presidency, how would you have approached this meeting differently?
Well, it's not so much differently. I think what we have to do, we have to respect that the United States is a large democracy, that it is the leader of the free world, that it is a very substantial part of Irish industry. Tens of thousands of jobs are linked to it. The reason we have done so well on foreign direct investments this last 20 or 30 years is because of our relationship with the United States. So we have to respect whoever is the president and the team that are there, and we have to try to work with them. A lot of us aren't enamoured with President Trump and what he said before he was in, what he said in the interim period, and what he's still saying. But we have to work with him, and I think that's a challenge for us. But we're a small country. We shouldn't underplay our significance, and we certainly shouldn't overplay it. And I think what the Irish government, whatever Irish government we have, and we're likely to see a change in the formation of it, at least somewhere in the Trump era, that we must get along with them. And I think more than anything else, if there was one thing, and maybe Enda Kenny did say it, but apart from the immigration, I would have been really been strong with President Trump in saying, listen, if you can continue talking about pulling out companies like the pharmaceutical companies out of Ireland, do you realise the damage this is creating? Do you understand the implications of that, both for you, President Trump, and for us? These are the things we have to try and get on with them, and it's not a question of a row or protest. I've no time for these protests. People are saying, we have to protest against President Trump, but the same people were saying we had to protest against President Reagan, and they had to protest against President Bush. What's needed to get change and to get success is to sit down and have dialogue, meaningful dialogue, to find the ways of moving forward that helps our country, north and south, that helps our economy, helps the future for our young people. And they're the things, and you only do that by engaging and working and fighting your case in a sensible, intelligent way.
And on the topic of foreign direct investment, there's an argument being made that as a country we've become over-reliant on foreign direct investment. Would you subscribe to this train of thought?
I think what we're coming over reliant on is corporation tax rather than and maybe that's the same thing. I think bringing in foreign direct investment is going to continue to be crucial for us, because in a globalized world, and with China all the time gaining pace on other superpowers, foreign direct investment is necessary from wherever it comes, because that will give jobs, it'll give us new products, and it'll give us research, and it'll give us world markets that we can sell into. The worry is that the taxes that we're getting from corporation tax now are taking up an enormous share of the total tax take, and if anything was to happen, that we could be back in trouble, like that happened in my time when we got over-reliant on the taxes from property, and I think we're in the same pool now, and we need to just be very careful. I'm not saying there are any easy solutions to these things. There never is, but I think we should learn from what is a very recent past.
I do want to get your thoughts on two regional issues here in the southeast. The first one being Rosslare Europort, and of course it's brimming with potential, yet it has not secured the relevant government support to facilitate its future development. Thinking back to your own time in government, why was it something that wasn't prioritised?
Well, I can't recall, to be honest, but I know what I did give priority for was to get the motorway right through the islands down to Rosslare, to try to develop it and to develop the whole road structure and infrastructure that we could continue to expand it and to gain more employment in the region. And as you know, we succeeded in doing that. We put in colossal investments to bring that up, and I think it should be continued to be built on. I mean, Rosslare is sort of tremendous port, tremendous region, and it's hugely important we continue to grow, particularly when we are an exporting country, and we're going to be continuing to be exporting into the dim and distant future.
So if you were representing Wexford today, how would you approach the government with a view to getting them to support the investment that the port so badly needs?
Well, as I recall in my days, whenever I came to Wexford, the road issue was always a big issue, and the infrastructure issue was always a big issue. But if I recall, Wexford always had a high proportion of unemployment, and particularly long-term unemployment. And I think it's around that case. I mean, Wexford is now such a short hop from Dublin. There's great potential there, and Dublin becomes ever increasingly a crowded place, very costly for jobs and for industry. They're always looking for new places. So I think it's around those issues that the argument and the case can be made.
One other issue as well that's holding the county back is the lack of a university in County Wexford. Now, there has been talk of the Technological University for the South East being created, but nothing has come of it. Again, if you were in our position here in Wexford, what would you be doing to try and get a university established?
Well, I think you know that I'd spent a lot of time trying to build up Waterford and Carlow and trying to get the southeast based in. I think what increasingly happens in other parts of the world is not that you always have a university in everywhere, but that at least you create a critical mass, whether the colleges, the technologies, or the old RTCs, or whether they're part of the university. But I think to try and get the complex, it's not ideal that people are always travelling long distances for full-time education, particularly when they're in their late teens or early 20s. And I do think in the whole southeast region that the best way of winning this argument is the colleges working together and having a plan. Increasingly so now I'm watching the universities in Dublin are having to cooperate and work together, and because resources will always be scarce, and I think for Wexford, for the faculties that they want is to try and do it in an overall context of the South East.
Now, next year will signal the end of Michael D. Higgins' first term as the President of Ireland. Does the President of Ireland as a position appeal to you, Bertie?
Oh, well, I'm sure it appeals to everybody in the country, but whether it's relevant to me or whether it'll ever be relevant to me is something I've never turned my mind to. I've taken the view, needless to say, and asked the question regularly, but I've taken the view that Michael D is a good president. He's the man in office. I think he's yet to decide whether he will stay there. I think if he does, he would win. And if he doesn't, I think there'll be probably a queue of people that will want that position. And when there's a vacancy, someone will have to start thinking about it for me, or I'll have to start thinking about myself. But in the meantime, I haven't.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.